Picture two people who each need $1 million this year. Watch the gap, because it is the whole reason you work hard your entire life and still feel like you are running uphill while others coast. The first is a surgeon. 60-hour weeks, and by the time that million reaches her account, roughly a third of it is already gone, taxed before she ever touches it. That is the only way she was ever taught to get money. Earn it and pay for the privilege. The second is a founder. She built a company, kept her stock, and also needs $1 million this year. She does not earn it and does not sell anything. She calls a private bank, borrows the $1 million against shares she already owns, and the cash lands in a few days. The tax she pays on it is zero. Same cash, same year, same country. One handed the government a third. The other handed over nothing. And here's the part that takes the shame off your shoulders. The founder did nothing illegal. No offshore accounts, no cheating. She used a rule sitting in the open the whole time, written right into the tax code. The only difference is that someone taught the founder how to read it, and nobody ever taught you. So let me be the one who does. The rule underneath it is almost insultingly simple. In this country, you are not taxed for being rich. You are taxed for selling. Earning gets taxed. Selling something for a profit gets taxed. But borrowing is not income, and never has been, because a loan is not yours to keep. So the moment people with real wealth stop selling and start borrowing, they step outside the system that taxes the rest of us. They live like royalty while reporting almost nothing. It has a name. 3 words a law professor coined in the 1990s to describe the machine. Buy, borrow, die. Buy things that grow. Borrow against them instead of selling. And then, that third word, the one almost nobody explains right, because it is not the borrowing that makes this free. The loan is only the part you can see. The thing that erases the tax forever happens at a single moment, the last one you would ever connect to a tax bill. Here is what I will do for you. I will walk you through exactly how this works, with real numbers, so you can see how someone worth billions legally pays a smaller tax rate than the surgeon who fixed your father's heart. Then the harder half the headlines never tell you. Why you almost certainly cannot copy this, and why the people who try usually get hurt. Because the same rule that sets them free has a catch underneath it, and for almost everyone watching, that catch is the whole story. It all starts with the first word, buy. It sounds like the easy part, and it is the part almost everyone misreads, because this first move does far more work than it looks. Here is what the people a few rungs above you actually do. They buy things that grow. Founder stock in a company they built, index funds, real estate, sometimes art. The asset changes, but the move never does. They own something that climbs in value, and they hold on to the one decision that matters more than any other: when or whether to ever sell. And mostly, they choose never. I know that sounds too simple to be the secret, but holding instead of selling is where the whole tax machine quietly switches on, and no one ever explained why. So let me. The government does not tax you for owning something that goes up in value. It only taxes you when you sell it for a profit. That profit has a name, a capital gain, and until you actually sell, the gain just sits there, unrealized, completely invisible to the tax code. Your asset can double, triple, climb 100 times over, and as long as you never sell, you owe nothing. That is the piece almost no one is taught. You were raised to believe the tax lands when you get rich. It doesn't. It lands when you sell. 2 completely different moments. So picture a founder. This one is made up, an illustration, but every mechanic under her is real. She started a company, kept her shares, and today they are worth $500 million. She paid almost nothing for them, so nearly that entire $500 million is pure gain. And the tax she has paid on it so far is zero, not because she broke a rule, because she never sold. Remember the surgeon. She hands over a third of her income every 2 weeks for money she has to show up and earn. Our founder pays nothing on money that grows while she sleeps, because growth is not a taxable event. Selling is. Same country. She just happens to be standing on the right side of that one line. But it leaves her with a real problem, the same one that makes most people assume this can't actually work. If she never sells, how does she get cash to live? You can't buy groceries with stock you refuse to touch. That is the second word, borrow. Instead of selling her shares and setting off a tax bill, she borrows against them. It goes by a few names: a securities-backed line of credit, a pledged asset line, but picture a home equity line, except the collateral is her stock instead of her house. She pledges the shares, the bank wires her the cash, and the shares never move. Still hers, still growing. Now look at the real numbers, because this is where it stops feeling like a theory. As of the middle of 2026, these credit lines cost most wealthy borrowers somewhere between 5.5% and 8% a year. And here's the first thing that should make your jaw tighten: the rate is not the same for everyone. The more you already have, the less your money costs. Someone pledging $5 million or more can land near 5.5% because to the bank they are not a risk, they are a prize worth competing for. Meanwhile, you and I borrow on a credit card at around 20% or a home equity line at around 9%. The person who needs the break the least gets the best one. That is not a glitch. That is the design. So our founder pledges $100 million of stock and borrows $5 million to fund her year. $5 million at 6% is about $300,000 in interest. And notice what that interest is sitting next to. If that $100 million in stock rises even 8% in the year, and 8% is just an illustration, never a guarantee, it grew by about $8 million. She spent $5 million, owed $300,000 in interest, and her net worth still climbed by millions. She lived like a billionaire, and the tax on that $5 million of spending money was zero, because a loan is not income. It never has been. You have to pay it back, so the law does not treat it as money you earned. And it gets quieter still. She does not even have to write a check for that interest. She can fold it back into the line, borrowing a little extra to cover it. So no cash leaves her hand, and no share is ever sold. The debt grows in the background, but as long as the stock grows faster, she barely feels it. The one event that would trigger tax, a sale, never happens. Sit with how strange that is. She did not get richer by working, she got richer by not selling. And hold on to one number because it decides everything later. She borrowed $5 million against $100 million. 5%, a small sip from a very deep glass. Now here comes the objection you are already forming, and it is the right one. She still has to pay that loan back someday. The interest keeps stacking. The balance keeps climbing. Eventually, the bill comes due. She has to sell to cover it. Selling triggers the tax, and the whole clever thing collapses back into the same system the rest of us live in. That is exactly what should happen. Except it doesn't. And the reason is the third word, the one I promised you almost nobody explains right. The word that turns a clever delay into a permanent escape. Die. When someone dies, the assets they leave behind get something called a stepped-up basis. It is one of the most powerful lines in the entire tax code, and I would bet most people you know have never heard the term. Here is what it does. In plain words, our founder bought her shares for almost nothing. They are worth $500 million when she dies. If she had ever sold while alive, she would have owed capital gains tax on nearly that whole amount. The federal long-term rate runs about 20% with a small surtax on top, so on $500 million that is comfortably over $100 million before her state takes a cent. That is the exact bill she spent her entire life sidestepping by borrowing instead of selling. But she never sold. She died holding. And at the moment she dies, the cost basis on those shares resets. It steps up from almost nothing to the full market value on the day of her death. Her heirs inherit the stock as if they had bought it that morning for $500 million. They can sell the next day and owe zero capital gains. Because as far as the tax code is now concerned, there is no gain. A lifetime of growth, the entire $500 million that was never taxed while she lived, is simply erased. The loan gets cleared from the estate, and the family keeps the rest, with the tax history wiped to zero. That is the whole machine, and it is almost beautiful in a way that should also make you a little angry. Buy and never sell, so the growth is never taxed. Borrow to live, so the spending is never taxed. Die holding, so the lifetime gain is erased instead of taxed. 3 moves, and the income tax and the capital gains tax never once get their bite. The borrowing was never about the loan. It was a bridge to the one moment that makes the tax vanish for good. Now I have to be straight with you because this is where the lazy versions start lying. There is one tax that can still reach the very top, and it is the estate tax. In 2026, after the law that passed in the summer of 2025, the first $15 million per person, or $30 million for a married couple, passes completely free. Above that, the estate can face a 40% tax. So, a $500 million estate is not truly untouched, but look at what got dodged along the way. The income tax, gone. The capital gains tax on $500 million in growth, gone. And the estate tax is the one fight the ultra-wealthy throw fortunes at, with trusts and foundations and lawyers whose entire job is to shrink that last number too. Below the exemption, even that disappears. So when a headline screams zero taxes, here's the honest version. On the income and the growth that paid for an entire glittering life, it really can be zero. And this is not a conspiracy theory. It is the documented reason economists have found that a few hundred of the wealthiest families in this country can end up paying a smaller share of their income in tax than ordinary working households do. The surgeon hands over a third every year. The founder, sitting on vastly more, can pay almost nothing for decades. Same tax code. The rules just bend depending on whether your money comes from working or from owning, and you were sorted onto the working side before you were old enough to vote. It is also why this has become a fight you have probably caught in the news. Some lawmakers want to tax the wealthiest on their gains every year, sold or not, the way your house is taxed on its value whether you sell it or not. The people defending the current rules make a fair point, so here is their strongest version. Taxing a gain nobody has actually pocketed yet is hard to measure, easy to get wrong, and could rope in people borrowing for ordinary reasons, like a family loan against a small business. I will not tell you who is right. I am telling you, so that the next time it flares up, you understand what they are really fighting over, which is more than most people shouting about it can say. So now, the question that matters for your life. If this is legal, and it is sitting right there in the code, why can't you just do it too? Open a credit line, live off what some books literally call the borrow button, and never pay tax again. I need you to hear this next part clearly, because it is the part that protects you, and it is the part every breathless version leaves out. The first reason is the raw material. This whole thing runs on appreciated, liquid assets, stock you can pledge to a bank tomorrow. But that is not how most of us hold our money. Your wealth, if you have built some, is probably in two places: your home equity and your retirement accounts. You cannot run one of these credit lines against your 401k or your IRA. And borrowing against your house means a home equity line at 8 or 9%, with an appraisal, with limits, and your actual roof as collateral. The founder has hundreds of millions in stock that cost her almost nothing. You have a mortgage and a Roth. You are being told to play the same game with completely different pieces. And it is not only you, so please do not take this as a personal failing. It is not even most people we would call rich. A dentist with a paid-off practice, a family with $5 million in a 401k, a small business owner whose money is locked inside the business, none of them can run this cleanly either. It is built for one very specific shape of wealth, a large, concentrated pile that grew enormously from a tiny cost and can be sold on a market in seconds. That mostly describes founders and early investors holding stock that went up 100-fold. The further your life is from that picture, the worse this works, and nearly all of us are far from it. The second reason is that rate again, and now you see why I made you remember it. She borrows at 5.5% because she is a prize. You borrow at 8, 12, 20, depending on the product. For this to build anything, your assets have to grow faster than your debt does. Her spread works. Yours usually doesn't. Borrow at a 9% home equity rate against investments that average 8, and you are underwater the day you start, and one bad market year buries you. The third reason is the one that quietly wrecks most people who try it: the margin call. When you borrow against stock and the market drops, the lender can demand more collateral that same day, or they sell your shares out from under you to protect themselves. They force the exact taxable sale you were trying to avoid, at the worst possible moment, at the very bottom. The founder with $500 million can ride out a 30% crash without losing sleep. You, with $300,000 in a brokerage account, get liquidated. The strategy that feels safe in a calm year is a trapdoor in a bad one, and you do not get to choose which year you are standing in. And the fourth reason is the deepest, so let me settle it with your own numbers instead of hers. She borrowed 5% of her stock in a year while it grew 8. A small sip, and the glass refilled itself. Now run it as a real person. Say you retire with $500,000 in a brokerage account, already ahead of most of the country, and you live on $40,000 a year by borrowing instead of selling. $40,000 against $500,000 is 8%, pulled out every year, with interest piling onto a balance that keeps climbing. Your account might grow 7% in a good stretch, and that is not promised either. You are taking out more than it grows, and the debt compounds on top of the gap. She drew one sip from a deep glass. You are draining a shallow one while it is still filling. Inside a decade or two, the loan overtakes the account, and a single downturn forces the sale. She can live off the borrow button forever because her draw is a rounding error against a fortune that keeps compounding. Yours is the entire account. Underneath all four reasons sits one truth, the one I want you to leave with. The die part does nearly all of the work, and to when you have to actually let it happen, by dying with the assets still intact. You never truly spend the wealth itself. The estate clears the loan and the basis resets. The ultra-wealthy can live on loans forever because the debt stays a rounding error against a fortune that keeps compounding. But if you need that money to actually retire, sooner or later you pay it back from income that was already taxed, or you sell and trigger the tax anyway. For a normal person, the interest does not stay small. It compounds until it eats the very asset it was borrowed against. You do not end up owning your stock. You end up owing it. That is the trapdoor under the rule, and I am pointing right at it on purpose, because I do not want you walking out of here and getting hurt trying to copy a billionaire. The same 3 moves that set them free will quietly drain someone who is merely comfortable. It was never a trick you could lift. It was a structure that only pays off above a scale almost none of us will ever reach. But here is why I did not want to just make you angry and leave. Hidden inside this machine is one piece of it you genuinely can use, legally, starting this year. It is the one part that was never about being a billionaire at all, and that is exactly where we are going next. So, here is the piece that is actually yours, hiding in plain sight the whole time. Strip away the private bank and the $500 million estate. And what was the engine? Never the loan. The loan was just plumbing. The engine is one quiet habit you can copy at any size. She owned things that grew, and she refused to sell them. So the tax never got its bite and never compounded against her. Selling is the moment the tax wakes up. She simply stopped volunteering for it. And that is the part almost nobody connects to their own life. Every time you sell an investment you meant to hold, to lock in a gain, or chase something hotter, you are volunteering for a tax bill nobody forced on you. The richest people on earth built part of their fortunes by doing less, by leaving the asset alone and letting time, not a sale, do the work. You do have one tool that gets even closer to her deal: a Roth account. You put money in, it grows, and in retirement, the growth comes out completely tax-free. The same answer she gets on her stock. And here's the fair objection you should be making. You paid income tax on that money before it went into the Roth. She did not pay a cent on her borrowed millions. That is true, and I will not pretend you can match it. But watch where the real money comes from. $200 a month at around 7% a year, which is never guaranteed, over 30 years, becomes roughly $240,000. You only put in about $72,000 of that. Everything above it is pure growth, and in a Roth that harvest comes out untaxed. The seed is taxed once. The harvest, the part that dwarfs it, grows in peace, exactly like hers. And one last thing, because it surprised me when I learned it. That third word, die, the one that erases the tax, is not reserved for billionaires either. Stepped-up basis is the law for everyone. The home you hold and the taxable investments you never sell pass to your kids with the gains wiped clean. The same reset she gets, just smaller, which tells you something sharp. The assets you mean to leave your kids are often the exact ones you should never sell while you are alive, because selling throws away a reset the law would have handed them for free. So, go back to the start, to the 2 people who each needed $1 million. The gap between them was never talent or luck. One only knew how to earn, and earning is the single form of money the system taxes the hardest. The other owned things, and waited. You will probably never run the borrow button, and after today you know you should not try. But you can stop volunteering for the tax and move, even a little, from the earning side of that line to the owning side. So this week, 2 small things that cost you nothing. First, find whatever you have been tempted to sell just to feel something and leave it alone on purpose. Then send your next spare contribution into a Roth, where the growth is the one thing the system was never allowed to touch. You are not trying to become her. You are just refusing for the first time to hand over money you were always allowed to keep.